So just before 4 p.m. on Tuesday, September 20th, 2016, which had been technically 2 days ago because it's after midnight right now, 12:47, September 22nd. But in Charlotte, North Carolina, just before 4 p.m. on September 20th, 2016, in Charlotte, North Carolina, at an apartment complex about a mile away from the University of North Carolina, a 43-year-old man, a black man, Keith Lamont Scott, who's a husband, a father of 7, a family man. He's also disabled. He was waiting in his car for his son to arrive from school on the school bus so that he could read him a book. While Keith Lamont Scott was peacefully waiting for his son's school bus, he wasn't messing with anybody, but he was killed by somebody. Police Chief Kerr Putney of Charlotte said that Brentley Vinson is the man who killed Keith Lamont Scott, though some witnesses said that wasn't true. They said that the triggerman was somebody different than Brentley Vinson. Brentley Vinson is a black man also who was suspiciously wearing plain clothes. Brentley Vinson had been a cop for a whole 2 years now, and he was also suspiciously didn't have enough experience, evidently, to push the button that turns his body camera on. He didn't have his body camera on. He's wearing plain clothes. Brentley Vinson also was suspiciously not even looking for Keith Lamont Scott. He was looking for someone else. He wanted to serve an outstanding warrant on somebody else for some mysterious unknown person. We're assuming that's what they were doing. Hell, he could have just been going around victimizing people. Maybe that's all he was doing. I'm gonna go around hurt somebody. Yeah, some mysterious unknown man. Who is this man? And how come nobody has been told about who this man is? Keith Lamont Scott was working for the division of police that's, my bad, not Keith Lamont Scott. Keith Lamont Scott is the man that got killed. And so Brentley Vinson is the guy that's working for the division of police that's suspiciously called the Crime Reduction Gang. The Crime Reduction Team, the Crime Reduction, isn't that all the police? Aren't all the police supposed to be reducing crime? So it sounds like that's probably a special team like Vic Mackey, who gets to go, do things above and beyond what the law calls for because, hey, trust me, guy, hey. So I'd like to know what makes the Crime Reduction Gang different than the rest of the police. So that's Brentley Vinson. Brentley Vinson was part of the Crime Reduction Gang. Keith Lamont Scott is the man who got killed. But those two names are going to be together for all of history. So I got some questions. I got, Keith Lamont Scott, if there was a gun, and that's a big if, since the gun wasn't registered to Keith Lamont Scott, nor has there been any evidence presented that Keith Lamont Scott even had a gun besides witness statements, of pathological liars. But what I do know is that Keith Lamont Scott did not premeditate a murder in the afternoon of September 20, 2016. Keith Lamont Scott did not plan on popping cops while he was waiting patiently and peacefully without an outstanding warrant on him or victimizing anybody in any way in his car waiting for his son's school bus to arrive. That wasn't the plan. That is not what he intended to do. Charlotte Police Chief Kerr Putney said that they didn't find a book at the scene. So, clearly everything that everybody else has been saying is complete bull because there wasn't a book at the scene. Were they looking for a book? Could they have threw the book in a trash can? We don't have any videotape that there wasn't a book either. Kerr Putney, the police chief, also didn't mention any drugs or needles, and I think this is significant. They said that none of that was found at the crime scene, too, because they're trying to, try to make him look bad. What is it that discredit them? So they're trying to discredit and disgrace the victim. That's what they did with that Alton Sterling. It's what they do with anybody, really, the right-wing media. They did that with the PCP found on that white-on-black murder in Tulsa, or the marijuana found in Samantha Ramsey's bloodstream months later in the toxicology report. They're like, aha, she did smoke weed at least sometime during that month. Which means what? What is that supposed to mean? That she deserved to get shot in the chest? And so they're trying to discredit him, trying to, disgrace him, but they didn't mention that there was any drugs, that there weren't any needles, there wasn't any residue of drugs, there wasn't any paraphernalia, nothing. No weed, no pills, no heroin, whatever, but nothing. So I think that's significant. I think you can safely assume there's no drugs on the scene. So there's no drugs. He's sitting there peacefully, patiently, waiting for his son to get off the school bus. They did say he got out of the car and went back into the car, which I don't know what that means. But not that he had a gun. Not that he had a gun. So I think it's just the reason why they mentioned the drug thing. It's just that's what Nazi bootlickers do to discredit the victim. Jesse Waters, the guy from Waters World, right, who just speaks with this arrogant, smug vernacular, just a tone of voice is just kind of it's all putting for me. It's like, why do you get to just be so, your existence is comfortable, you're fine, you're not going to ever get shot, right? So Jesse Walters, he had said that Keith Lamont Scott had previously been charged with a DUI and an assault charge. So, there it is. Case closed. An assault charge. A DUI. He was drinking and he was driving. Well, shoot far. And since he got an assault charge, heck, Keith Lamont Scott should just become a cop. And what does either one of those charges have to do with what happened to Keith Lamont Scott in that afternoon of September 20th, 2016? He got in trouble several years ago about something. What does that have to do with getting murdered in that moment, in that afternoon, September 20th? Nothing. It has nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's just to paint him up a certain way. This is a bad guy. He drunk and got into, he drank a beer and got into a car one time and then got caught. And then another time he got an assault charge. Cops assault people day in and day out. It's all that they do. It's the reason why they signed up for the force, so they could assault people. Kerr Putney insists the cops lead by example, right? That's what real men do. That's how real men solve their problems. You walk up on the scene, you shout, you yell, and if they don't like it, you start using violence immediately. Violence, if you have a badge and uniform, that's not a crime. That's not a crime. People say, verbal violence. Oh, Obama raped my ears with his verbal violence because he criticized Christianity that one time. Verbal rape. No. There's definitely a big difference between words and violence, right? So Kerr Putney, he said that the officers at the scene, and there were allegedly 3 other uniformed police officers there, in addition to Brentley Vinson. They had their body cameras on, but they only saw the gun that Keith Lamont Scott had allegedly had the second time that he exited the car, not the first time. So the story is, the official story is, he gets out of the car, he gets back in the car, he gets out of the car, this time he's got a gun. But this is from the video. This is, check out the press conference that he gave. So he says the second time he got out of the car, he had the gun, but the first time, he didn't have a gun. He said, no, sir, they saw the weapon in his hand the second time he exited the vehicle in 1828. In reference to the alleged 3 body cameras of the alleged 3 uniformed officers who were there, who were part of the takedown, Kerr Putney said, the videos that I reviewed, I cannot see in totality everything that occurred. So the videos that he's seen may not give the entire scene, the entire shot, entire what had happened. Kerr Putney said the whole matter occurred in a matter of seconds. An eyewitness said that the cops broke Keith Lamont Scott's window. Keith had his hands up. A taser was used against Keith Lamont Scott. Then they shouted that he had a gun. And then he advanced on the cops, but he didn't point the gun at the cops. And Brentley Vinson shot Keith Lamont Scott at least 3 to 4 times. Keith Lamont Scott's brother said that Keith Lamont Scott was scared when the police were approaching him, and that's why Keith Lamont Scott got out of his car. One witness said that Keith Lamont Scott was unarmed, and that he had his arms at his sides when he was shot. His arms at his sides. The moment when Lyric Scott found out that her father was dead while she was Facebook live streaming it, just watch how the cops at the scene didn't give a crap. If anything, they're like, oh, great, now she knows. I mean, they knew because they could see his, brains scattered all the concrete. They knew he was dead. That's why they didn't try to resuscitate him. They already, oh man, that's old news to them. Oh, they knew that, an hour ago. But it just shows you how psychopathic they are. They are just cold-hearted, psychopathic Nazis. One cop murders a man, then the rest of the gangs, the rest of the boys in blue, or Baby Stud, the one black woman, they square off against the crowd, hoping that they get violent so then they can see them, get some action. When somebody gets violent, then they're like, oh my God, we can't wait to do that. And you know what? Somebody should get violent. There was a murder. That person should be arrested. That person needs to be assaulted. That person needs to have some battery. And he needs to be subdued. And cops like to punch you in your face. If they're subduing you, break his face, break his nose, subdue him, throw him down on the ground, put handcuffs on him, and if he resists at all, well, you got to knee him a couple times. You got to punch him in the gut a couple times, knee him a couple times, throw him in a pen, and then put a high bail bond on him. Make sure you rape him, too. When he's in the pen, make sure he's getting raped. Jailers are notorious rapers. They're supposed to be the lead by example, but if the people who are leading by example are criminal, you're going to have a criminal population. Not only should that Vinson guy, Brentley Vinson, he shouldn't just get arrested, but so should all of his accomplices. Those 3 other officers and everybody that was covering up his crimes. All of them should be arrested. Are there any good cops in Charlotte, North Carolina? Are there any good cops? At all. He murdered a person. Isn't that probable cause a crime may have happened? There's a dead body. There's a dead person on the scene. Brentley Vinson needs to be arrested, put in jail, along with the other 3 cops. Arrest them or release the videotape. Release the tape. Establish that trust with the American people that cops have lost by repeatedly assaulting folks over and over and over again and raping them and stealing from them through civil forfeiture, just outright murdering them. My guess is that Keith Lamont Scott didn't point the gun at the officers. At no point in time did he go, officers, you're going down. At no point did he say that. That didn't happen. And the video footage would show a gray area, who did right and who did wrong. Well, they don't want to admit that they did any wrong. They're the cops. They're perfect. They never make mistakes. And they'll lie. They'll lie to cover up all their mistakes. No, I never made a mistake. I'm superhuman. So, North Carolina, under the Republican Governor Pat McCrory, signed a law that says only a judge can decide to make the video available publicly. That's the only way we can get the videotape. This is actually going into effect in October, so this law doesn't even apply, the law that they're citing. But Governor Pat McCrory doesn't mind calling in the National Guard. He doesn't mind getting all the troops into Charlotte, North Carolina to beat up everybody. He don't mind that. But getting the videotape and making that public, that's out of his domain. He's got no power to do that. That's for the mayor and the police chief to decide. But he signed a law that says only a judge can decide if the videotape can be made publicly. Otherwise, what a person has to do, if you're one of the people that appears on the videotape, or if you're heard in the footage, you can request to view it with police consent. But you can't make any personal copies. So that means that members of the public, only if you're a part of the videotape, or if you said something in the videotape, I guess if you're a lawyer for some case, I would assume, but maybe not. But you can only view the videotape if you're somehow connected with the case in the police station with the police surrounding you. And if the police deny your request, then one has to petition a judge and get a court order to allow them to view the tape. But they still can't make any copies of it. So the ACLU slams this new North Carolina law as shameful. It is disgraceful. In fact, you want to talk about disgracing somebody, this Pat McCrory is a bad dude. This is just more obstacles for the public to get the videotape. That's all it is, to protect the cops even further than what protection they already have. The mayor of Charlotte's supposed to view the videotape tomorrow. The police chief has already seen some of the videotapes, but he says that it wasn't totally clear with the videotapes he's seen so far. The Republican Governor Pat McCrory has declared martial law in North Carolina. He's called out the National Guard. Pat McCrory has made some headlines when he supported state legislation which overturned a Charlotte local ordinance that offered protections for gay and transgendered people. So he's a bigot. He's a bigot. He hates gay people because he's a closeted gay person himself. He's bursting at the seams and just can't wait to put all the penises in the world in his mouth. So Pat McCrory, because he's a closet homosexual, pretends to hate gay people, so that way nobody is fooled by his, extreme gayness. The mere possession of a handgun does not give the police probable cause or reasonable suspicion to detain you for stop and frisk in North Carolina. They are open carry. They're an open carry state. So the mere fact that you have a handgun isn't enough to be stopped. There's got to be some mitigating circumstances. There's got to be something else that they said, okay, you're being suspicious. Not, hey, you got a gun. What's that gun for? And the police chief, Kerr Putney's statement doesn't mention any other factor other than Keith Lamont Scott stepped out of his car, went back into his car, came back out of his car with a gun. And then he started to approach the police, but he didn't point the gun at him. But the police were in imminent danger. The poor police. They were so scared. They had to shoot him. But they only mentioned, the gun. And so my take on that is, if it's justified, is if it's pulled or not. If the gun is holstered, firmly holstered, then, open carry, Second Amendment, you're allowed to do that. Now, when you go for the gun, when you put your hand on the gun, when you pull the gun out of the holster, I think that's when you're ready to shoot somebody, that's when you could be shot yourself. Because you're defending yourself. You have a right to defend yourself. So if the gun is ready to be pointed at you and someone shoots you, then that's self-defense. And if you have a right to carry a gun, if you're just carrying a gun in your hand, it doesn't take, but half a moment. But if it's holstered, then if you are going for your gun and, if you pull a gun that you should intend to shoot, or you're just making everybody mad for putting their life in danger. But if you're a responsible gun owner and gun, holder, then it's holstered. And when you pull that gun, that's when game on. That's when it would be justified to shoot that person. So if he's walking around with the gun in his hand, I can see why that would be a threat. If the gun is in his waistband, so that's my take on it, okay? But I think that we need very specific laws about holstering the guns, and this is for open carry and concealed carry. Concealed carry, like if it's inside your jacket, like somehow makes it not as dangerous. If anything, that makes it more dangerous because I don't know who has a gun and who doesn't. That's what the point of open carry is. Everybody can see that that man over there has a gun. But I've seen some people wear AK-47s on their back, and is that properly holstered? How easy is that I guess you would have to, I don't know. When you holster it, you got a moment or two to defend yourself. And that extra moment could be the difference between life and death. But if we're just allowed to hold a gun and point it at anybody, and it's like, well, it's not loaded, and I wasn't going to shoot. Oh, my God, it was loaded, and I did shoot. That's crazy. So Police Chief Kurt Putney said that Keith Lamont Scott died at the hospital, but I'm even skeptical about that. Some witnesses said that they didn't even try to resuscitate Keith Lamont Scott or give him CPR. I saw an ABC News footage of the EMS medical personnel surrounding Keith Lamont Scott after he had been shot many times, but Keith's body was blurred out. So it's not obvious what they were even doing to him. I saw an ambulance, but they didn't get there until 20 minutes later, so I'm not even for sure what time frame that I'm looking at. It was only a minute-long clip. And they were working on him, and then they lift him up and they put him into the ambulance, and that was it. So when did they do that? Immediately after? 20 minutes later? I saw lots of uniformed personnel there, but only a few people actually working on him. Everybody else is a bunch of looky-loos. What's happening? Oh, my God, a man's dying. I got to watch this because I'm a sick, sadistic psycho who just wants to watch people die. So I can't tell who the uniformed personnel, which one's EMS, which one are the cops, if they're undercovers. And are there any doctors? Were there any doctors there? Or just a bunch of professional looky-loos? Oh, I get paid to look. I'm a looker. I get paid to look at people who get shot, watching them breathe their last breath. That's sick. That's sick. That's what serial killers like to do. Just eager to watch. And to be frank, really, why are the cops even there? They've already subdued the threat, right? Get out of the scene. What are you even doing there? I saw cops there. They were with the medical personnel wearing their dehumanizing sunglasses, standing up, acting all cocky. What are you doing there? What is your purpose? Just being nosy or not helping out just to watch? Get out of the way. Let somebody who actually gives a damn do their damn job. I remember when I had to endure the violent assaults of the LMPD. I also had to endure the taunting and the insults of the EMS. Nobody gave a crap about me. Not at the hospital, not at the jail, not in the EMS, not on the streets. The one EMS guy, the guy who rode with me in the back of the ambulance, right, for my own protection, he wanted me to try to fix my broken nose. Myself. My nose was over here. He wanted me to correct it. He was like, yeah, do it. That'll be fun for me to watch. You in agony and pain, and you'll probably mess it up. Then we got to the hospital. That same EMS guy was making jokes about me getting my nose broke. Look at his face, man. The cops really done a number on him. It was all one big funny joke to these psychopaths. There was no humanity. There was no decency. They didn't care. They don't care about people. And then they charged me several $100 to $1,000 for that ambulance drive. I could have drove myself. That was unnecessary. But instead, they put me in the back of an ambulance with a psycho who was a jerk, and the doctors didn't do crap. The jailers were violent, too, and rapey. They're rapey. Ultimately, the ambulance people, which I'm not even sure if any of them were doctors, they were unsuccessful. So whether he died on the scene, which is what I would guess, or at the hospital, I think that's a good point. I think it's something we need to know. Sometimes one excuses the police for not using the video, or one excuse for the police is out of respect for the family. No way. No way. If that's me, release the videotape. Release it. Release the damn tape. I don't care. I'll err on the side that if something happens to me, your boy, Jonathan Masters, out of Kentucky, if something happens to me, I'm going to err on the side that I was gunned down over some dumb bullshit. That I didn't do anything. That they did something. And I don't care how mangled my body is or how bad my brains are splattered all over the place. Release the damn videotape. And if my family has a problem with it, don't listen to them. Because my wishes should supersede, my will should supersede over everybody's on how I want the videotape of my death to be released. Let the public decide right or wrong based on the evidence. Don't sanitize what happened to me like what they did to the Iraq War. Perhaps if we, the American people, actually see the bloodshed, then we wouldn't be so passive about being in the midst of a 15-year global war on terror and slaughtering 1.5 million Iraqi people. 1.5 million Iraqis are dead. And we're still at war. Is there a war over here? Doesn't feel like it. I also like how Lyric Scott, Keith Lamont Scott's daughter, kept on calling that one black woman police officer baby stud. Look at that baby stud. Oh, can I see you, baby stud? I don't even know what that means. It actually sounds like a compliment, not really an insult. So let's not forget that all of this also comes at the tail end of the deadlocked mistrial of Randall Carrick. Randall Carrick got away with murdering Jonathan Ferrell. Even though the trial turned into a deadlocked mistrial, the state failed to retry the case. So what happened? One of the witnesses said something they weren't supposed to say, so oops, oh well. Let's just let the murderer walk free. Jonathan Ferrell was the football player. He wrecked his car, and then he goes knocking on doors to get some help, and then they just shoot him out of nowhere. And then also don't forget about that case. It took 2 years before the police dash camera video footage of Jonathan Ferrell's death was released. 2 years. And then after the mistrial, the state just decided to let Randall Carrick, the hair triggerman killer, go. Just like that. And on the looting, on the burning of trailer truck goods, on the ATVs driving through Charlotte, none of that's murder. None of that is the taking of innocent life. It's not revolutionary war. It's not even terrorism. It's an uprising against police terrorism. And while I don't like the assaults on innocent people, the sabotage against private property, I'm okay with, if only for the reason of getting some media attention, of which all 3 major cable networks were covering Charlotte tonight, last night, probably right now. They're still probably saying what's going on in Charlotte. They love the violence. They love it. Nelson Mandela would approve of sabotaging private property. He didn't approve of revolution. He didn't approve of terrorism. But things needed to change, and you need to get some media. We're not even talking about Tulsa now. They didn't riot. There was no violence in Tulsa, so who cares about Tulsa? And that was right on camera. There's no questions. He was shot in cold blood. No riots, no media attention. That issues. Let's put that baby to bed. All right, let's not talk about that anymore. No, that needs to be talked about. If anything, that's a clear-cut case. This isn't a clear-cut case. Release a videotape. You have all this contradicting testimony. We need to find out what happened. So to recap, what we do know, Keith Lamont Scott wasn't bothering anybody. Keith Lamont Scott wasn't the target of the outstanding warrant. Keith Lamont Scott wasn't bothering anybody, shouldn't have been bothered. He's a family man. He was just waiting for his son to get off the bus from school so he could read a book to him. No drugs on the scene, not bothering anybody, being peaceful. And if Brentley Vinson wasn't there, if he wasn't harassing Keith Lamont Scott, none of this would have ever happened in the first place. The only minority in the U.S. that are destroying the lives of all the Americans are the lunatic billionaires, the 400 billionaire exclusive private country club like Kelsey Warren, the CEO of Transfer Energy Partners of the Bakken Dakota Access Pipeline. And then in relation to the presidential election, when it comes to criminal justice, prison, police reform, that will only come from Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. Maybe Hillary, definitely not Trump. Trump loves the crybaby cops no matter what they do. Hillary's only touched on some criminal justice issues. But on marijuana, she's wrong. On the war on drugs, she's wrong. On Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, she's wrong on all of them. So is Trump, only worse. Criminal justice, prison, police reform are major issues that America needs to address. And Jill Stein and Gary Johnson are the only ones that have the solution to this problem that our nation faces. The bloodshed in Charlotte shows the importance of having both Gary Johnson and Jill Stein in the debates coming up in 4 days. Jill Stein and Gary Johnson are also agree when it comes to ending these wars for empire. They also agree to ending the drug wars. These are major issues. These are major issues. And if the most socialistic candidate and the most anarcho-capitalist candidate, i.e. the far left and the far right, agree on major issues that the two duopoly candidates aren't even talking about, this only shows you more of a reason why they should be in that debate. They agree on major policy issues, so we definitely know that it's an issue that America needs to address. The drug war, the wars of empire, and criminal justice, prison, and police reform. Not the Nazi bootlicker who loves the militarization of the police. We need to demilitarize the police. This is out of hand. And we also need to release the videotape. So, those are my thoughts. R.I.P. Keith Lamont Scott. R.I.P.